So welcome back, and this is the third of 3 meetings on General Transit Feed Specifications, GTFS. I'm Nancy Doherty. I'm with the National Rural Transit Assistance Program, commonly known as National RTAP. And Marcy Jaffe, of course, is our GTF expert and will be our instructor. For those of you who attended the first 2 sessions, thank you very much for your dedication and perseverance. We hope you've made some good progress in entering a route into GTFS Builder. In this final session, we will cover creating shape files and our workaround for GTFS Flex or demand response services. And then Marcy and I will be available to answer any questions, or even if you folks want to speak amongst yourselves, that's fine too, a little bit of a networking opportunity. As always, we'll start with a couple housekeeping slides. If you're having any problems with your audio, of course, you can call in, and the meeting ID and the passcode is there as well. As always, you can use the chat to get help. Using Zoom will help you as best as we can if you're having any problems, and use the chat to submit questions. The meeting slides and a recording of this meeting, as well as the first 2, will be posted at nationalrtap.org about a week from today. Oh, you're already on the next slide. Okay, so as we suggested a couple of weeks ago on May 20th, if you have one monitor, we suggest your screen be organized with the Zoom meeting on one side and your work area on the other, as shown on the slide. It's obviously much easier if you have 2 monitors, but you certainly can use, you'll be fine with one. So next slide. Yeah, so using the chat or even unmuting yourself, there's just a few of us here. We'd like to kind of hear how you're doing. Have you made any progress? And also, have you taken a look at the checklist that's at the back of the guidebook? Was it helpful? We'll deal with the more specific questions, technical questions later, but we just kind of want to do a check-in and see how you're doing. So I'm going to pretend this is a classroom, and I'm going to pick on Jason. Jason, have you made any progress, or how's it going?
Well, to be completely honest, I made the first training. I wasn't here for the second one. I did join in via phone, but I wasn't able to actually listen in. So my supervisor, Gabrielle Chavez, who is out this week, is the one that's been handling our GTFS. So I'm just trying to absorb what I can, to be honest.
Okay, so all the sessions, like I said, are recorded and will be on our website. So if you do want to kind of check it out, the second one was much more detail oriented and very specific. So
I definitely will. I appreciate it. Thank
good,
you.
yeah. Colton, do you want to say hello and tell us how you're doing? You can stay muted if you want to. No pressure. Okay. And Carolyn, how are you doing with GTFS Builder? Hi, you're unmuted. We're having trouble hearing you, but if you get the audio working, we'd love to hear how you're doing. Or you can use the chat, that works as well, Carolyn. Okay, so at this point, I am going to turn this over to Marcy.
Well, I'll actually ask for Natalie, because she was asking us some very thoughtful questions. Natalie, have you had a chance to touch any data and think about this? Do you want to join in the conversation of any progress?
My apologies, I didn't have the whole list of presenters up.
That's
Natalie,
right.
yeah.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So my particular interest is, Carolyn's mic is acting up. I was hoping that maybe you guys would talk about how to use this tool for on-demand, because I think right now that's of particular interest for us. So
that's the topic for today. So so that's a perfect comment.
Okay. And I know Virginia is going to be the backup person, maybe similar to Jason. And so she's absorbing right now. Someone else in the organization might go on vacation or take a day off, and Virginia will be stepping up to help out. So if you want to add anything, Virginia, you can, or join us in the conversation a little later. But we know that your status is moving forward as well.
Yeah, and Carolyn, her mic, she's having problems with the mic, but she just said that she is looking forward to learning about the on-demand services. So
Okay.
I'll work around for GTFS Flex. Okay, Marcy.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you all again for joining us today. One of the pieces of the puzzle, is to help us create the flex on demand route. In order to do that, you'll need a shape. Now, while there are a lot of professional GIS experts out there, and we don't want to take away from their expertise, we're going to use some available tools that you'll see at no cost. And we want to believe it's actually going to be fun to create some shapes. So that's what our focus is today, shapes in order to create the on-demand service. The shapes information is managed inside of the ImportExport Workbook. And so the pink tab is what we're going to be moving data into. And we just want you to kind of wrap your head around, well, where would I find this data when I need it, and where will I put it when I create it? While shapes are required for the demand response service and the flex service that we are offering, we're creating the shape so that the physical route on the road is the one where riders could be standing to be picked up. And that's our purpose in creating the shape. For fixed route, it is optional to create shapes. So it's not required for you to get out of the box and on the map to have all of your shapes and shape variations for each trip group. But it's nice because riders won't see a straight line over a river or a straight line through a backyard of a neighbor. You'll be now snapping the route to the road. On occasion, some of our agencies will use the route map that they create in the shapes process for their website. And so we're now finding ways to offer some data integration, save you some time, something that you can modify if the route changes and not have to go back to the graphics department. So we're actually going to put this on hold for a moment and jump right in to a display of a route on the road. And I'm hoping everyone can see a Western Washington route. It's in a pinky beige, pink color. And this is a trip from Forks, Washington to the Native American tribe at Makah Reservation. What we have are variations of the trip. And right here, if you can focus your eyes, that portion of the trip does not occur throughout the day. And so we will have different shapes that are for each trip group, for each variation when the trip changes and adds or removes stops. This is a fixed route service, and so there's no request for pickup, but we'll show that in a few minutes as we focus there. In order to create this line, we go to My Maps. So you'll see when I type My Maps, mymaps.google.com, it will give me this page where I can create new maps or work on the maps that I already have. Ideally, from our other steps, you have stops that you've created and you've been working toward adding the bus stops to a map. If you didn't have them, you'd be starting like this and you'd be adding pins to your map. If you have created your bus stops, creating shapes is literally minutes and moments. So let's review how we will go into the add directions function within My Maps. And doesn't want to give me a chance to add directions. Let me reload the page. And this creates a layer on the map. The layer that we're going to create will literally be typing in from stops along the way. And in this case, we're choosing the Forks Transit Center. And it's a pin down in this location, in this area. I know it's in the southern part of the route. And we're going to go to Nia Bay.
So you're actually using the stop names for your driving directions, Marcy?
We're using the stop names. That's why they're coming up with a bubble or a pin
Mhm.
as shown here. So one of the stops along the way is Highway 12 at the Coast Guard. And the Nia Bay stop is also on the map. And we have now created a shape layer that if I turn off the bubbles for the stops, you can now see that we are snapping this route to the road, very similar to what we have here, where the road and the route are the same because that's where the bus is traveling. Inside of this functionality on the map side, we can now modify. So if in the town, we now know that the bus doesn't stay on the main road, it comes to another road, we're just pointing to, allowing the pointer to turn into a circle and pull that route off the road. If it goes in more wiggles and comes back a different way, you have a lot of opportunity here to really show your route. We're not trying to go in and out of parking lots. Don't get yourself frustrated with that. Just stay to the main trajectory of that bus on the road and you'll be fine. We are able to show in and out of parking lots in another phase of shape creation. So we've modified our route, and if we say, oh, didn't want that one, oh, don't want this one, you just point to the circles and they come and go with a click. Once we've created our shape line that we like, we go up to the menu for My Maps, which is under these three dots, and we ask to export the KML. And when we select export to KML, we're choosing the directions. Now, I didn't make a stop there, but it created a name for this layer of what we were doing, leaving Forks and going to Nia Bay. If you have multiple layers, you're going to want to select the layer that you're working with. And you choose that we don't need any extra icons and features, just export the KML file and we say download. We're now going to take this information and drop it into Google Earth, where we have some functionality of making this route go into our Excel spreadsheet. And way before My Maps exist, we had to work with Google Earth. And so we're building on that success, and we don't have to look at this line. We know it's the line that we want. We just have to right click on it and say copy. And we bring into our Excel spreadsheet the ImportExport Workbook. And we go to the Shapes tab, and in a blank cell, we double click.
Blank
Left
cell in
click.
column A.
In column A, a blank cell in column A. And we choose or type in a number 7, which is pasting the KML line, and we say okay to that. And then we are going to name it from our schedules workbook, the name of that trip group. And that allows us to drop in our new shape, or the shape we've created, and assign it to the stops that will be used for this particular route. I'd like to stop for a moment and see if anyone said, I mean, I might want to watch it again, but are there any questions about this concept of taking a My Maps layer and bringing it into ImportExport Workbook? Those.
So Natalie has a question. Is there a reason why you're all the way down at row 1810?
So you are always savvy to ask. I had some other shapes, and it's a very good question. Why is it like thousands of, it's hundreds of points to create a shape line that's a 60-mile trip? So all good questions. You would, in a blank ImportExport Workbook, be in cell A2, which is what Nancy asked me to do, but I wouldn't have a chance to show you other samples.
So you can have several different shape IDs and the data associated with that ID on this particular page, on this tab, correct?
You are organizing all of the shapes within the Shapes tab and all the variations. So I just want to go back and show you in My Maps what happens if we have a variation that we saw over here, and we go to or not to a particular destination. So how would we add that variation to our shape? very easily inside of our My Maps. We're back in My Maps where we have ability to move the line around. I want to add a destination, and the destination for this is the correction center. And if we add that, we have now created an alternative shape, a new shape with the variation, and we would go through the same process of downloading, stopping at Google Earth, and saving it into our import-export workbook with a new name based on this variation. Now, I didn't actually finish. I wanted to show you that you can pick up and move your stops along the way. And it's not logical for it to go to A to B to C. It's literally just adding that stop along the way. So if you made a mistake and you say, wow, the shape line isn't lining up, you might come back into My Maps, modify the route with the added or removed stop, and just create it again. You may decide that you want to have each of your shape variations as their own layer and name them as such, and then you can come back in and modify them or publish them to your website. If you're just sketching here, you'll know that you have this tool for sketching. So Nancy, any questions as we dive a little deeper into how My Maps would allow?
Yes, Natalie has another question. Why might someone have more than one shape?
An excellent question. So I feel like I invited you to ask that. So we are creating a match between the stops in stop order. We think of a bus route as the morning route, and it includes all variations. It has express stops. It doesn't go to the senior center. Then midday, it goes to the senior center. In GTFS, you're breaking out each of those variations so there are no blanks and there are no asterisks saying, oh, see that footnote over here, because every other Tuesday we do this. You create stops in stop order so that the trip plan is precise and doesn't have any footnotes to read. So Natalie, does it start to make sense that a shape is a variation of a shape because the trip group has a different stop in stop order? In this particular case, we added this B location to the morning trip, and then in the midday, we don't stop there. And it isn't just a blank on an Excel spreadsheet. It literally has to be a group of stops in stop order, remove that stop, create a new group, a trip group, and name that shape accordingly.
So
And
every
that will be how
every trip group needs a shape if the routes, if the stops are different.
I can't quite read the full. Do the shapes assume?
Do the shapes assume they're in back, or do you have to have separate shapes for inbound and outbound, I think is what she's saying. Yeah.
Correct. There's no assumptions. And so, I want to create the other direction. All I have to do is move A and B around, and now I've created the other direction. Can you see that Google is not going to guess where you're going to stop on the way back? You're creating the shape and every shape variation based on the data that you have. So we're getting very solid in the connection between a snap to the road, because for an on-demand service, you're saying, well, these are the neighborhoods we go to. Even though it's flexible, you're going to go to different neighborhoods, but more or less, these are the kinds of places we go, and we're going to show you how to build that shape layer for an on-demand service. So let's keep moving, and Natalie's brain will continue to help us think through some of these questions. And again, don't hesitate, anyone, to ask. So let's dive right in. I think we had one slide, Nancy, that we wanted to show that this idea that riders must call the agency is the functionality that we're looking for, that the rider will see that there's a phone number to call, that they need to make contact, or else they won't get picked up. So let's see how we can do that.
So it's kind of, now that we've done creating shapes, we're going to move into the actual workaround. and you're going to need the shape for the workaround.
So many agencies will offer us as a rider information on the website that explains, we have a general purpose dial-a-ride, it's available, and it runs north between here and here and there, and give us a call. So that has worked well. It meets the community's needs. And in this case, we have an area of where that service is available described in words. And now what we want to do is help take that functionality of, I've got a map, I've got some words. Now I need to know if I'm a rider, maybe new to the area, could I get a ride? Who would I call? What would I do? And so what we have available through our workaround is to take this segment that's here, this portion of a stand-in route, knowing that it doesn't travel there every day if no one's going, but depicting that area of our community that we offer a flex service and the rider needs to call for pickup. So we can literally assure someone that if they look at their details, they're going to know that this is an on-demand service. It says dial-a-ride in the name. We click through to the dial-a-ride page if we want to learn more about this particular route, and they can come back and sign up or do whatever they need to do. Now, I shouldn't say sign up. This is not paratransit service. This is, I need a ride and anyone can ride. I'm not a senior, I'm not a veteran, I'm anybody that wants to go from here to Port Angeles. So Natalie had some questions. I want to be sure we can answer those. So Nancy, could you help me with that?
Oh, sure, yeah. So this seems to be tied to a fixed service. What if there's no fixed service tied to a dial-a-ride service?
We are working within the constraints of the current GTFS system. In the future, there will be a Polygon and Flex service, and when that happens, all of this winds down. What we're trying to do, Natalie and all, is say, how would a rider find anything? They probably travel on some of these main roads. That's where people live. And if somebody clicks within that area, they're going to see that a service is available. And that's what we're offering. The alert will come to them that there's a dial-a-ride service with absolutely no schedule, but they start calling in and then they get picked up at their door, and where they need to go is where they will be dropped off. We're trying to bound the service based on that image so that we're offering flexible on-demand service within the service area that's available, and that riders can find the service, call in, and then in the future, they don't need to go to a website to find out that the service is available. This is the opportunity to learn more about an on-demand service. So to meet the requirements of Google, in order to get on the map, we create a route or two, and we publish that at the website for the agency, and we offer the ability for the rider, we agree that any rider can take the service.
So, so Natalie says, and she's exactly right, you just choose a main road to almost create a dummy route. We call it a stand-in route, but you're exactly right.
This is how we're going to create, and we could have a few little rivulets off the main road, but we're not trying to say every doorstep. We're just trying to say along a main road in your community, service exists. And what is nice is the new feature that's become available is that the rider doesn't have to be standing at a bus stop if they want to plan a trip. Anywhere along this road, the line is available. That's what continuous pickup and continuous drop off have just added to the functionality. So it used to be we'd have to put in a good handful of bus stops, or else it would look like you're walking 5+ miles on long distance flex routes. So these standard routes can now just say start and end, and then anywhere along there, the rider gets an inkling that they could get picked up, and then they'll call for a pickup. So we're using your creative mind. We're trying to work within the constraints that we have. So what would we do within our GTFS? Just as you saw for a fixed route, we created a stand-in route with a start and an end. I'm not putting in 100 bus stops. I just need this to create a shape for this segment. And then I can go on and create more segments, and I can create more segments, and I can create whatever we believe to be a depiction of this community based on some data that we know because we've been operating this service for a while. And maybe there is a Greyhound or an Amtrak or a service that connects into our on-demand service. And so we'd want to show in those cases where there are connections. And otherwise, at least the rider has a chance to see that the bus route is available. So let's walk through. I'm going to turn off some of these other samples, but it was more to help you visualize the opportunity that you have to create an image of a snapshot of where we go and allow the rider to find you. So we would take this line, and in this case, we're going to take the line that is named Twin View, and we're going to export it. And I'm going to go into Google Earth for a moment, because sometimes if I leave layers on my map, it gets a little confusing. And so I'm going to clear the decks here, and that we do recommend in our how-to videos. And we come back down into the map, click on it. Google Earth is already loaded and ready to go. We've created our shape line for this variation in this group. And we just right click and copy, go into the Excel workbook and bring into our import-export workbook somewhere in our shapes data all the way at the bottom, so that we can go on to a blank row and add a new shape. And maybe we're going to assign this shape a name associated with this segment. And now I'm in the schedule generator. This is going to be my North Central 1. And I'll want
the trip group.
In the trip groups within the schedule generator, it helps us organize the data for each of the variations. And so we will call this North Central 1, and number 7 is going to be DAR 40 North Central 1. And we can remind ourselves to bring that information into our schedule generator and name this over here, the name that we have for this shape in our trip group, and assign it across to each of the times that we put in there. We might want to set an expectation that our service level might be twice a day that we can make it to this neighborhood. We're going 40 miles, 60 miles, or it's within a neighborhood and a 1 mile or a 10-mile radius of a town, and we can go maybe once an hour. You're able to create whatever expectation so that the rider sees, yes, I should be calling in, and maybe it's once a day that I should call in. Early in the morning, we make this trip to the next town on a flexible service, and I should know to plan on leaving early in the day. You're giving some of the constraints that may be known, but are not really published as fixed service, and you're setting the expectation. Any of the variations that you have will get their own shape name and shape ID. And we have now created a flex route where we are assigning to this flex route that the continuous pickup is the rider should call call in. The stops that we have are just very few stops. We don't need more information than a start, an end, and maybe a middle stop along the way. And we're going to walk through now how to take our schedule generator information all the way through to an on-demand trip. We would go from our intro controls tab to clear all the information, generate the stop times and trip. It takes just a moment. And then we have data here and we grab that by control copy for the entire sheet. To the left of A and above 1 is one way to get there. And then we're going to put that into our ImportExport Workbook. And if you try to paste this anywhere else, it will warn you. You must match the size and location, which is A1. So a lot of these details that you might say, I can't remember, you're guided. It won't allow you to do something that it won't accept. And so now we have our shape information identified in the trips tab. So it's saying which days of the week do these trips run and how will I know when to operate them. It's from there, and we bring that into our trips tab in the ImportExport Workbook and paste. I'd like to just walk through each of the tabs that we have and show you for the on-demand route what modifications we might need. There aren't very many because we're working within the constraints of a static GTFS. There'd be no changes to your agency tab. However, if you had a different phone number that you wanted to call in to dispatch, which was different than your fixed route, you could come up with a secondary agency ID and then be sure to assign that, to match that to this agency tab. For this agency, it's the same phone number. The calendar tab is used for the days of the week. This particular service actually runs Monday through Friday with Saturday. And so what I like to do sometimes is just as much copy and paste as I can. Excel is so friendly that way. And now I've created Monday through Saturday service for this particular flex route. The days of the week, those are telling us when we do not have service or if we need to add or modify service. Maybe there's a Saturday service that we run on Veterans Day. This is the example that we have here. So if we're going to have Saturday service that is not run for this particular route, we would assign, oops, I think I need another letter in there. And if you make a mistake, it's going to come back to you later and say some of this data is missing. So not to worry, there are validation tools that are going to check your database and say data mismatch, we need to reconfirm. So you're building your data. If there's variations, you come in and assign them. Within the routes tab, we now want to assign the dialer route 40 route to this. It's the same CTS agency. The route short name is going to be blank because we want the rider to see Squim dial a ride. And I'm just going to show you for a moment what we saw when we were planning this trip for a rider to know this is probably a little different. It's a dial a ride and it has it right in its name. In our route type, this is whether it's a ferry or a bus, and almost always we have a bus. In the case here that we want to bring in that website, so we would just grab that website and drop it in, and that way the rider will always have a way to come in and see more information about that particular route. And the colors that we have, I dropped them in so I wouldn't have to type those in. And they are the pinky, I mean, the green, bright green color that's used for this agency's data. I'm going to take off my extra row because that would be confusing. I'd have a data mismatch there. I don't need it twice. Thankfully, if you know that this entire route is going to be continuous pickup and continuous drop off, you could assign a number 2 to that column of data, and the entire route is flexible. If, however, when you're building your data, you have stops along the way that are flexible, but then you get on the freeway for a portion of this route to connect to the Greyhound, you wouldn't want somebody standing on the side of the freeway. And so inside of the schedules workbook, you can turn on and off this feature of continuous pickup and drop off. We've now walked ourselves through the data creation, and I think we'll just reconfirm, Nancy, if there are any other steps here. We've we did need to add some stops from the fixed route. So we have a few more stops in our database. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to put those pins on the map, start and end. We brought over our stop times and trips. Those 2 tabs just came from our schedule generator file. And as good measure, I might want to put today's date into our feed version, because sometimes I don't remember which version has gone live at a service provider of an app. And this is our tag or mark to do that. So we could then generate our data from our notes tab, and we would be going into our feed folder. And I like to clear it out, then I know for certain that there's nothing in there. So it's helpful to just watch this get filled up with the data that we need. And we now have our text files, which is the mandate from Google on, or any of the trip planners, and we right click and compress the file. And this teeny tiny 50 KB file will be the entire GTFS for this agency. And our last step would be to go through a feed validator. And this is a link inside of your guidebook, and it's also in our helpful videos and helpful links at our website. And so we just choose this file and let it run. And if there are concerns that are identified as errors, we will remove them. And if there are any warnings, we'll take those out and decide if we need to take any action. So in this case, we have some shapes that are not matching because I tried to clean up my data and not have so many hundreds and hundreds of rows of shapes. But here's a chance for us to go, oh, something is missing and I need to make a correction. This is the double check on all of what you do. Let's see if there are any. The others are warnings. So maybe the route color isn't contrasting right. And so this warning advises us that we want to switch from black to white in the contrast color. If we aren't using a shape, it gives us a warning about that, and you can remove them. So I think you're getting a feel that these are the steps that you'll need to create your GTFS, and our flex route is your creative mind to say, let's, even if the agency says, I don't know where people go, they're probably going along a main road. They may be connecting to another service, and there's no wrong answer. You're creating the opportunity to discover this route where it's otherwise a little more challenging for a new rider. So I'm going to take a breath here and see if we have some new thinking, some opportunity to work together through anything that hasn't yet made sense about the steps that we take, and then this working within the constraints that we have for on demand.
Marcy, I just want to just add in terms of the number of points that you see on your shape ID when you bring them in. You will find the straighter the route, the fewer the points. But if you've got a nice curvy route, there's many, many points that need to be defined to make that shape snap to the road, as Marcy says. So don't be nervous if you have only 100 points or if you have 8,000 points. It just depends on the actual shape.
Correct.
The other thing is, you said that we have a way, and we're not going to go through it all today, but in the guidebook, there's a method for making sure that the shape, the route, is within 30 meters or 100 feet. Did I have that right? I think it's right. Of a bus stop. So there's a method for just checking that, and sometimes that is worth doing. So if you do create a shape, make sure your bus stops are within 30 meters of the shape. So yes, we'd like to move into questions and hear from you in terms of, how you've done, what you've thought about the course that we've presented, any feedback. If you want to talk to each other, that's fine. You can all unmute yourself at this point. If any of you are jumping off the session right now, we'd really appreciate it if you could very quickly do our evaluation survey. You can just take a picture with the QR code here, or and actually I'll put the URL in the chat in just a moment as well. But anyways, let's just open up for questions, and I'll get the URL in the chat while we're doing that.
So Nancy, I think Natalie had a thought here. It would be interesting to see, and maybe you can work on your survey there. It'd be interesting to see if more of these on-demand services were input into GTFS across the country and look at before and after ridership. Well, that has been the big question, Natalie. I think I am often told, well, how can I justify spending the time, minutes, hours to put some information in? Do I know if I will get more riders? And at this moment, I don't think we've done any of that analysis. What we do know are some of the agencies actually say there are fewer calls to the call center and ridership is up. So that gives us an implication that they're finding us, other than needing to go to my website and work through navigating my own trip plan. So Georgia has completed a trip plan that documents occurrences. So maybe we could work with Georgia and see if we could show some before and after. Certainly layering in some demographics, census would be possible. There are some awesome tools out there for visualizing data and showing heat maps of how far you can go using public transportation. So once you have a shape line, you can now begin that analysis. So Natalie, feel free to just jump in if I'm not giving full assessment of what you're saying.
Can you see?
Yeah, the piece that Natalie is saying is absolutely true. And all of us at National RTAP are, tearing our hair out thinking, when I see a dial-a-ride of any flavor, it must only be for special needs, for seniors, for fill in the blank. And quite a bit of our community at National RTAP offers on demand. We'll pick you up, we'll take you where you need to go. And I'm thinking if we can display some portion of them on the map, they will no longer be hidden, because Google will not allow it to be, or Apple or others will not allow those services to be only for seniors. They will now become visible to all riders. And that is our purpose in developing this workaround. And then once GTFS Flex becomes fully functional, you're ready to go. You have all of your pieces in the puzzle organized. You'll just now be creating whatever shape polygon that they'll be using to say, I have a service area of, city of, or 5 miles from a center, and it will be very easy for you to convert your data then.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, you might have said this already, Marcy, but that if you have a service that's dial-a-ride only for ADA compliance, that cannot be published. This has to be your on-demand service that you put on Google or any other trip planner. absolutely has to be available to everybody.
We're working within the constraints that we have, and maybe in the future we'll have a trip planner that says if you're over 65, if you're living within this county at this moment, it's the everyone can ride, and we want everyone to be aware that they can ride on these services by creating the GTFS Flex workaround, our Standin Routes. So
Another one.
it's a little harder to talk theoretically. I could take a moment to answer the question that Nancy brought up, which is how would I see whether my route is actually snapping to the road or not?
Okay,
And
just
if that would be helpful, I
Yeah,
could do
just-
that.
Natalie has just one other comment in the
Oh,
chat.
please.
Yeah, the cool thing about considering this is that the rural context is that since there is a smaller body that is often served, it might be easier to document any potential impact of entering the information into GTFS.
There we go. From 1 to 2 is a big increment. So absolutely. And I think some years ago before pandemic, the sense was, we're going to get flooded with thousands of riders if we make our information available in a platform other than what we have, which is pretty much word of mouth and whispering. Now, in post-pandemic, it's going to take us a little while to get our riders back and build their confidence, and everyone is doing a phenomenal job at building that confidence. But what if one additional tool in the toolkit is you can find my agency? I'm no longer just available for those who already knew
Yeah,
I existed.
yeah. Jason, Carolyn, Colton, Natalie, is there anything that we've covered in the past 3 sessions that you'd like us to re-review? Anything that was a little fuzzy, whether it was, establishing bus stop coordinates, the trip routes, trip plans, trip groups, the difference between a trip group and a route that sometimes can confuse people. What spreadsheet is used for what? All right, you guys are all good.
Well, I'm going to put, if Virginia's still on the call, Virginia, you're stepping up as someone who wouldn't normally be staring at this data, and yet at your cellular level, you understand all this data. So could you just join the call with a few words and say, it's making sense to me that I'm organizing the data in a couple of spreadsheets, and then I'm, going to figure out how to output it. But is Virginia still with us?
I think she's left. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Sorry, I should have checked. And Jason, you've seen some of this data before. I will put you a little bit on the spot. You've seen how it functions. You've certainly seen New Mexico Rail Runner turn on and off service, and the need to pivot and be flexible and get the statewide park and ride lots that you manage in and out of the GTFS files with Gabrielle's lead. Is it starting to make sense for you how this data will work? Thank you for taking off mute.
Yes, it is. The technology is very interesting, and just for my learning style, it's just going to take me, like I said, Gabrielle's really done 99% of handling all of it, and I've just sort of been on the emails. But yeah, once I get my hands on it and review these videos, which I'm looking forward to do, they're very informative. Thank you. I think I'll have no problem at all. Yeah.
Okay.
So
And
we
Jason,
have,
Nancy, just one second. We have these videos where it's a little more informal conversation. We have the more formal video that will go into in-depth schedule workbook or building shapes or on-demand flex. And we go a little slower, or at least you can start there without all the other chatter and just focus there. And then of course, we'd love your feedback. So I'm sorry, Nancy, you were going to add.
I was basically going to say what you're going to say. There's kind of 3 ways to approach this right now. We've got the recordings of these webinars, the sessions that we just did. Let's just kind of go through everything fairly quickly. Then there's the 11 in detail videos on our website, on the National RTAP website. And the third thing is the guidebook if you prefer to read. you know, kind of have like the instruction manual to your left and then the filling in the data. That's another way to go as well. Something for every different type of learner.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, good luck. Keep in touch. Let us know how you're doing.
Oh, I think Gabrielle
Okay, we all will. Yeah.
remarks quite a bit, so,
Good.
We're pretty much on speed dial there.
yes, thank you.
And they're an example where they go very far and wide in the offering of park and ride shuttles. I'm pretty sure it would be tough for me to go to the website, read the orange route, read the green route, try to remember it, what day and time, does it actually connect to the train? Does it connect to the Santa Fe transit in that town? What about in Albuquerque? It would be nearly impossible for, I'm sorry, I may think I'm smart, but I'm not that smart. It's too much information that I have to process and fit together. We take away all of that complexity and offer everyone a chance to say, I'm here, I want to go there, and these are my trip options. They may not be the quickest compared to driving, but at least they exist. And I can see other times of the day where the transfer might be a little better. Speaking of the possibility of sharing how the training of this might work, National RTAP is partnering with NADAC, and on June 10th, we're holding a session to talk specifically about being the mobility manager, the travel trainer, and embracing this information so that you can share it with riders, teach it to case managers, help at the hospital, and make sure that people are using the tool and it's not just for those in the know.
Yeah,
So,
and not so much about GTFS Builder, but actually how to read, how to use that Google map to plan a transit trip. So it's not really a technical presentation, but it does kind of, this is the back end of what Marcy will be teaching on June 10th.
and it harkens a bit to Natalie's question. Would we be able to see before and after? So these travel trainers will say, I have this tool. Now let's see what happens once I train you in it. Is there a chance you can get where you need to go from this toolkit that's now online? And so we want to be sure we're giving everyone a chance to access the information, screen reader friendly, all of those different methods, and talk through how we can maybe make it better if that's possible.
Yeah. Natalie, you have a question about, have we shared with the WI Mobility Management Group? Do you mean the June 10th training?
Yeah.
Yeah, hey, nice to hear your voice. Yeah, so it's definitely been on our website. It's been in e-news, and I'm sure WI Mobility gets the e-newsletter, but I can send it to you directly, the invite, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I could just share it with folks. We actually did part of our case study with the one entity in Door County, and I think the people there are always looking for options and ideas, so it might be worth kind of distributing that way. You might get some participation.
Sure, thank you. And thank you so much for your really amazing participation in this training. You've added a lot. So thank you. So
We know it can seem a little out of bounds, but once you have some data and you start playing with it, we'll be here. We're available to you. You're more than welcome to watch the video, but you know, from Jason and Gabrielle's perspective, sometimes they need it done in the next 2 or 3 hours. So they send me the Excel file. They say, I'm specifically concerned about this area. Can you look it over? And, you know, a half hour later, as best as I can, I turn it back around and they can keep moving forward. So this isn't a once and done training. National RTAP is really here to make sure you will be successful. There will be hiccups when you go through a review with Google. We can't guarantee we know all of them ahead, but whatever they are, we'll walk through them. In some cases, we've actually pushed back and said, it's optional. You can ask me a million times. I don't need to do that. And then it helps resolve the issue. So we can assess with you those kinds of concerns that might come up and work through them so that you're not spending 5 or 10 more hours updating your website to a new shade of pink that they think you want to use. So there's been some fascinating little gremlins that creep up, but we solve them and move forward, and we make sure that you launch at Google Maps, Apple Maps, Yahoo, Bing, here, the transit app, they're all going to be using the same data set.
So, and I think what Marcy kind of is saying is we can help you at the very, very beginning when you're just trying to, what is it that I put in that agency tab? The very simple beginner stuff, all the way through when you start possibly having some issues with Google. We can help you with that. And we are, we're available. I don't want to say 24/7. That's not quite fair to Marcy, but we're here all the time, and we do get back to you very quickly. So,
Colton, I'm not sure that you're actually operating any scheduled service. So the conversation today was more, let's see what we could do in Utah. Does this get your mind thinking? I don't want to pressure you, but if you could share some feedback, it would really help us, if you don't mind.
You were right on the spot. No, it gets my mind thinking, I have my notes, but yeah, it's great information for me right now at this point. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
And in some cases we say we're very flexible, we go everywhere, but really on Tuesdays, we do make a medical trip to the next town or 3 towns over. And even just publishing that stand-in route could really be helpful for riders. And then you're going to fill in that same bus that's going with, 8 or 10 seats or whatever the safe number is right now. And riders could begin to find your services. So I'm always surprised when I say, oh, you're on demand, but what about Tuesdays? Oh, well, on Tuesdays, we do something special. So start creatively thinking through what you're doing and see if there's a way to flexibly show it as a stand-in route.
Marcy, is it time to send out the final exam?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think we're good. I just want to say thank you to Marcy for doing a terrific job teaching this class. It was a lot of work to prepare for it. She did terrific. And also to NATO for partnering with us for this training. Again, you've got the information for the survey, and in the next slide, or maybe the slide before, Marcy, is just our contact information. If you don't have it yet, I'm sure you do, but we're all there, and we'd very much like to hear from you and hear how you're doing. So I guess that concludes the 3 sessions. It's been a pleasure working with all of you, and please stay in touch. Have a good afternoon.